Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, it's good to see you guys. I was looking over last week's. I don't think I have anything really that I was going to cover from last week. Is there anybody have questions that they want to ask about last week's passages or anything? No questions from last week. Did everybody get this week's reading? This is basically Genesis chapter 20 through 26. Everybody get that covered this week?
Yep.
We're in good shape. All right. So let's start with any questions or thoughts on those passages. So what did we come up with? Yes, Kevin. You're muted.
Okay. Well, one of the things for sure is that Abraham isn't actually lying about Sarah being his sister.
He's stretching the truth a little bit, but that's true. She's a half sister. Yeah.
She's still his sister. And then Isaac does the same thing.
Yes, Isaac does do the same thing. And he is lying.
Yes.
Not his sister.
No, the cousins.
What?
No, but they are cousins, right?
They are cousins, yes, but not his sister.
No.
The other thing about that is you find out that the sins of the fathers passed down. I think it's one of those examples that, what we do, our children do, whether we like it or not. They're going to repeat a lot of the mistakes we make. A lot of the things that we do are sown into the next generations. And sometimes it's, they call it generational sin, can go on for many, many, many generations until someone breaks that cycle. And it's really weird. I remember when I was in seminary, there's a word for this where you can have these generations of poverty and all this stuff. And then they actually sociologically documented that when somebody becomes a Christian, their life goes up socially and economically. So the example would be a person who's got an alcoholism problem and everything's not much of a father, becomes a Christian, quits drinking, starts showing up to work on time, is more dedicated to honesty, being on time, diligent, hardworking, and then all of a sudden he starts getting a promotion. His kids are more committed to school because he's expecting more from them. And then each generation gains more in a socioeconomic, the way they just kind of improve. But then it only takes one generation to take all of that and go, boom. It's one person, and you can take people that you can look at this sociologically. You look at case studies where you have families of affluent college degrees, doctors and everything, and then you'll have one kid that just doesn't want anything to do with the lifestyle their parents given him, and become a wild biker, drop out of high school and everything else, and generations are lost until somebody breaks that cycle again. And that generational sin stuff, we look at it as God, it looks like God curses the third and fourth generation, but he's actually predicting what happens when you reject God. What happens to the following generations is just the natural outflow of the father or the parents' decisions affecting multiple generations ongoing. So, but it takes a long time to climb out of it. So, and you can see this actually in the history of Israel too, as we move on. When you see Abraham does really well, right? He's a rich man, right? You see Isaac's a rich man, right? You'll see that Jacob and Esau both become really wealthy men, right? And then all of a sudden they endure 400 years of slavery. And how many generations does it take before Israel's have the self-respect and dignity to climb out of a slave mentality that they're a free people? And it takes generations, not just one. So as soon as they become slaves, it destroys their psyche. And that's true worldwide. If you look at any people that's been subjugated, whether it's like African Americans in slavery, whether it's American Indians or any indigenous people throughout the world, when they've been conquered and turned into slaves, they are the last ones to climb out of deprivation in any culture. Once their identity is demolished, it doesn't come back very fast. So you look at Moses. Somebody else would rather be slaves because they like the security of the food and everything else. And he's like, I'm so fed up with these people that you've given me, Lord. But they were slaves, and they don't know how to think any differently than that. Can you guys hear me? I had a sign said my internet was unstable for a second.
You froze for a brief moment, but
yeah,
you came back pretty quick.
Okay. So if you look at the whole story going through this that way, the depraved from the haves and the have-nots and things like that, God has a lot more to do with the way they live, and how that translates the way what we hand off to the next generation is a big deal. So, and it affects every part of their life, not just morally and who they choose as a wife and how they raise their children, but it affects their education, how they treat people, their economic, socioeconomic levels. It affects everything. So, that's how that goes. Any other questions or thoughts over the passages?
Yeah, what defined that as a sin back then?
Rephrase the question again.
How did they know they were sinning back then? What defined that as a sin?
That's interesting.
I don't recall reading anything prior to this that said that was a sin for them to marry the half-sister or cousin or anything of that nature.
I don't think that would be the sin. The sin would be that lying that this is your wife and telling somebody else.
Well, okay.
That would be the one that most people would readily say, oops, that was a bad mistake. You shouldn't have lied and handed your wife over to somebody else because you're afraid you were going to die. But that would have been it. The question, though, of how do you know what a sin is a really good question. And I have said this a lot, and this is a phrase I'd like you to memorize, okay? It's not about what is right and wrong. It's always about who gets to say. It's not about right and wrong. It's about who gets the right to determine what's right and wrong. And then you can gain a lot of mileage out of this if you're dealing with somebody who struggles with whether God is real. Because if God isn't real, then there's no such thing as right and wrong. It's just opinions. You can go into a cannibalistic community and they think it's okay to eat your neighbor. We think it's okay to love your neighbor. It's two opinions. So if I'm talking to somebody who's struggling with, why, Christians think they're right, or whether they have a problem with, objective morality, or they'll say that you don't need Christianity, you don't need a book to tell you what's right and wrong. I say, okay, then how do you come up with what's right and wrong? Who gets to say? Who gets to say is a real question. And if you can show them, is it just your opinion? Everybody's just supposed to follow your opinion of what's right and wrong? Well, they would say no. Right? They wouldn't say, oh, yes, I'm the one, the all-knowing one who knows what's right and wrong. So I don't trust myself because I'm not always right. And I'm certainly not going to trust you. I don't even trust my parents. So and certainly how many of you guys trust the government's the one who's going to tell us what's right and wrong? Not a single hand, right? So what is the entity that tells us what is right and what is wrong? And if you can get somebody to understand that, then you come to the place that if there is no God, God help us, because anything goes. Because if I think it's okay to murder because it helps me, you can't tell me that's wrong. That's just your opinion. You can't tell me, well, it's against the law. I'm like, okay, first person who's never broke a law, stand up, throw the first stone. We've all broke laws. You see what I'm saying? We can justify what we do, but somehow we live, especially in a Western culture, we believe that mankind can come to a place where we can collectively determine what's right and wrong. If that was true, then the country wouldn't be so polarized right now, right? Because we would all have grown to a place to agree whether there should be gun laws or whether there should be socialized medicine or whether abortion's right or wrong. But we can agree. That's the point, is who gets to decide. And that's a whole phrase you want to remember. When it comes down to discussing if there is or isn't a God, the bottom line is then, if there isn't a God, there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's just opinions. And if you think it's the law, then whoever has the majority, if I get a majority that think cannibalism's okay, we pass that law, and thou shalt eat your neighbor. You can't stop it, right? The majority determines what's right and what's wrong. If you believe the majority doesn't have that right, then even where's the foundation for that? You have no foundation whatsoever. If God doesn't exist, then it's true. We need to invent God to determine what's right and wrong for us somehow, because there's no way we can survive without someone telling us what's the difference between what's right and wrong. And what's so stinking amazing to me is that's how the Bible starts out. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve are tempted with the ability to know right from wrong. And the Bible points to the real, you just want to cut to the chase. The Bible right off the bat nails the biggest problem that we have as human beings. We cannot figure out what's right and wrong without God's help. And that the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil was supposed to fix that. It didn't. But that's the problem. So to me, I'm like, if you're an atheist, you don't want the rest of the world to be atheists. Because if you do, we live in a world of atheists. Then
There he goes.
That makes sense.
Well, it did up until you disappeared when you were speaking for about 5 seconds.
I'm sorry. I don't know what you didn't hear then.
You said atheists don't want the world full of atheists, and then that's where I lost you.
Yep.
If the atheists wouldn't want the whole world to be filled with atheists, because then basically you justify any dictatorship. Hitler's just as good as Jesus. Gandhi is just as good as Stalin. They're the same. There's no difference. It's just competing opinions. And I could have that conversation with an atheist. You don't want the whole world to be an atheist then, because then everybody gets to determine with their own morals. Every dictator that rules, they're the ones that have done it right, because they were the ones to rise to the power and have control and enforce what they want, what's best for them on everybody else. No matter how ruthless they are, they're the winners. And there is no judgment in the end. There's nothing. They just get to live until they die. And if we're all going to live until we die, why don't we try and find some island to be a dictator of? That Castro would have had it right.
Yeah, true, but the 10 Commandments are kind of like our foundation of what's right and wrong. We all believe in that. That's why we're here.
Well, yes.
On this.
Well, let's think about that for a second. How many of you guys keep the Sabbath?
Somewhat, mostly. To be truthful.
Yeah, Kevin? You're muted, sorry.
That's all right. So, but isn't there a difference between the Sabbath and the first day of the week? The Sabbath is actually Saturday, isn't it?
I was going to.
Yes. So how many of us never work on Saturdays?
Yeah, that's unfortunately, no, you're right.
Now, Old Testament, we could take you outside the camp and stone you.
Right.
For mowing your grass. So the 10 Commandments, and this is important when we get to it, the 10 Commandments are a piece of the law. It's important, but it is only the whole law. And Paul makes this clear. You don't just keep one part of the law, you're supposed to keep all of it. And he who fails in one part of the law fails in all. It doesn't matter whether you break the Sabbath or you covet, you're a lawbreaker. You don't have to break all the laws to be a lawbreaker. It only takes one law. So the 10 Commandments, as important as they are, aren't really the foundation that many of us think they are. And the New Testament really rewrites. Now we follow the law of the Spirit, which is much different. So,
Jacqueline, yep. I'm going to unmute her. The hand went away, but I think she still had something. Jacqueline?
Oh, sorry. The hand was just raised because you were asking who keeps Sabbath, and Mike and I keep Sabbath on Saturday. So.
Oh, And you can. The thing is that if the minute I start teaching that you should keep the Sabbath, I'm teaching the law, which is what Paul opposed when you can't just pick out one piece of the law and say, thou shalt be, you have to be circumcised. You can't do that with the Sabbath either. You can't do that with any piece of the law. We're not supposed to be doing that. So one day holds one day higher than another, whatever. But as soon as you start saying that that's a requirement, you deviate from the law of Christ, which is our new covenant. And but keeping a Sabbath would be really healthy. If everybody would just take one day and not work at all, it's really healthy.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't keep it just to keep the law. We do things from the law because we know that they're pleasing to the Lord, and we want to bring the Lord joy. It's not about trying to earn our way into salvation. It's about trying to bring joy to the Lord's heart.
And yeah, and I don't know whether that does anymore or not, to tell you the truth. I do know this is the way I look at the Sabbath, and the way I look at a lot of the 10 Commandments is that under the law, you owed God one day a week. As a Christian, I know him every day of the rest of my life. Every day is really my Sabbath now. So and Jesus, said, I'm working on the Sabbath. My Father continues to work, and I'll work on the Sabbath, but I'm supposed to spend 7 days a week doing the Lord's work, whatever he calls me to do. However, as a workaholic American nation, we tend to work as much as we can because we want to make as much as possible, get as much done as possible, make life as productive as possible, and alienate all our relationships as much as possible. So we would be better off if we did that. But just making it a law, you got to be really careful. So I said the same thing with tithing. I don't teach tithing because then you just say, okay, I'm keeping the law, 10%. Not supposed to be keeping the law. You're supposed to be a giver. So what does God want me to give? All that I earn is really his. What do you want me to do with it? God, take whatever you want. That's the way we're supposed to live. And 10% is a pretty good rule of thumb. I start my kids that way. I make it a law in our household and use it as a teacher, but I don't. And then I teach them what giving's about. It's not about 10%. It's about being obedient to whatever God leads you to do. So other questions or thoughts? How many of you guys had this thought? So let me open this up and I'll do a little bit of reading here. All right, Genesis chapter. Let's see here. Chapter 22. Oh, can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I got a little thing said bad connection or whatever, so I want to make sure. All right, so starting in chapter 22, sometime later, God tested Abraham, and he said to Abraham, "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey, and he took with him 2 servants and his son Isaac. And when he had got enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place that God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked and saw the place in the distance, and he said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he carried it, himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "Go. God himself will provide a lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When he reached the place the Lord had told him about, Abraham built the altar where he arranged the wood on it, and he bound his son Isaac, laid him on top of the altar of wood, and then he reached out his hand to take the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord came out to him from heaven or called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on your boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now listen to this. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Why did God only know then? Jim.
It's because that up until then, God was, giving everything to Abraham and fulfilling promises. I mean, the son was the one promise he made that they wanted so badly. And really, Abraham wasn't offering anything or even showing any trust until that moment, which is still mind-boggling to understand how somebody can be so clear on that communication to even go that far.
I can the video back on.
Let's think about this. But why wouldn't have God already known? He's omniscient, right?
I think he wanted Abraham to realize himself how much he trusted God.
But then he could have said, now you know that you fully trust me. But he said, now I know.
Well, that's maybe I'm sure you're going to tell us now.
Maybe I won't. It's one of those passages that makes my head do somersault.
Out of all that, that's what makes your head spin. To me, it's like, how can he be so clear that's what God was telling him to do?
I can see what God was telling him to do, but I'm like, God, you already knew he was going to do this. Why'd you make him do this?
Could it be that he was saying that this is the point in time that showed that to me versus other times in your life, that this was the defining moment in the timeline as you see it?
It could be. It's a really hard question because it goes back to the same one at the flood. It's like when God said, I regret that I made man. And later when he takes Moses out of Israel with all the Egyptians, I regret that I rescued all these people. I'm going to wipe them out and make a nation out of you. And then Abraham changes God's mind. Now, if God knows everything, he'd know that he wouldn't have really regretted it, that Moses was going to change his mind. How would God need a human being to change his mind anyway? So I'm sitting here thinking, here's the all-knowing, all-wise creator of the universe. Looks like he doesn't know something, doesn't it? Yeah, Kevin.
Well, in verse 11, it says, but the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son. So, is it an angel of the Lord or is it God speaking to him?
Well, that's a good question too, because most scholars, and I would agree, that the angel of the Lord is actually Jesus. And so
Okay.
when you get to there's several places where the angel Lord appears, and then the Lord said to him, and there's no distinction between the Lord and the angel of the Lord as the conversation continues. And after I was just reading in Gideon, Gideon's afraid because he saw the angel of the Lord, and all of a sudden he's afraid he's going to die because he's seen God, seen the Lord. So this Jewish scholars at the time of Jesus's time, they have writings talk about the two Yahwehs. There's these two people that represent God. There's the angel of the Lord, and then there's the God on his throne, and he seems to show up in two places at the same time. And so they were seeing a portion of the Trinity even before we were revealed that in the New Testament.
Well, one of the reasons why I asked too is that you always see when you're talking either about God or about Jesus, it's capitalized. And in verse 12, because you have not withheld from me, me is not capitalized. It's in
You're
lowercase.
frozen on me.
You didn't hear it?
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. You did not hold. Man, my signal is not going really well. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. You did not withhold from me your son. Okay.
But me isn't capitalized. That's why I was thinking, was it an
But
angel?
Hebrew
No.
doesn't have capitalizations.
Yeah, that's just an English. That's an interpreter that would be doing that. Whoever's translating wouldn't capitalize that.
But 11 has, but the angel of the Lord, and the Lord is capitalized. So if the Lord was talking,
the reason why 11 is capitalized is because the Lord is all capitalized because that's Yahweh itself. So they're always, every time you see Lord all in capitals, it's YHWH or Yod, He, Vav, He. Those are the Hebrew letters. And so every time you see all four letters capitalized, that is God's personal pronoun name. That is his name there. That doesn't translate into English very well. You're not going to see Yod, He, Vav, He, and no. But they're showing you that's what's going on in the Hebrew text by capitalizing every letter. So when you see them say, Lord, I don't know what you want me to do, and they think they're talking to a man, it'll be capital L, small O-R-D, okay? And then later they'll figure out maybe it is really the Lord, and it'll all of a sudden go to all capitals. So you'll see that. So pay attention when you see all those capitals. That means something. I don't think there's any doubt that this is God that's talking to him here, and there's no doubt that it was God that asked him to go make the sacrifice for his benefit. So the real question is, and this is, I had brought it up before, and it's worth considering. We believe in an all-knowing, all-powerful, almighty God, but there just seems to be places the scriptures indicate there's some things for whatever reason that God has left either hid from himself or left in such a way where he doesn't necessarily know the outcome. And it messes with our theology because we believe God is all-knowing. He knows the future. He knows everything. But there's times where it looks like he's saying he doesn't. Jim, what were you going to say?
It's just marking, it's almost like marking a point in a relationship, so that's something that's very obvious, because he's also reiterating the promise of making, everybody being blessed through his generations and everything at that point. And maybe I'm just wondering if it could be just a marking in time and a marking in this is an important milestone in our relationship with each other.
It could be. The whole act itself is prophetic. Many times you will see, if you're reading the Old Testament, that God will tell prophets, I want you to act this out. And the act is acting out a demonstration of something bigger that's going on. So like Hosea, he's asked to marry a prostitute, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not because he wants to make Hosea miserable. It's because he's trying to show, as miserable as Hosea is with having a wife that's committed to prostitution and still in this relationship, is that's how God feels with the nation of Israel when they go worship other gods. And so he is literally creates a dramatic enactment of what's really going on in the bigger picture. So this is like Abraham is being asked to dramatize the bigger picture of the Father sacrificing his son, Jesus Christ, on the cross. And the parallels are just unmistakable. You have a Father, his only Son. You have the Son carry the wood. You have Jesus carry the cross. And you have the Father who says, I'm going to follow through because what you didn't, I'm not making you do. You said you were willing, I will do. I will carry out the sacrifice of my one and only Son. And so he carries this out. And what's interesting is that there's no way anybody would see the parallel until after the fact, right? There's nobody in the history of the world until the crucifixion of Jesus Christ that anybody would have seen this story and said, wow, God the Father is going to send his son, sacrifice him with wood. You couldn't dream that up. And God is really unique in the way he sets up the prophecies about Jesus and his sacrifice and his resurrection. It's all prophesied, but it's extremely well hidden from the Jews. They should have recognized it when it was happening. And if not, then certainly by looking back, you see it very clearly. But you cannot see it from the moment it's happening. Were you going to say something, Kevin?
Well, one thing I did find interesting is that it says, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son, but Isaac isn't his only son.
It is considered his only son because it's his from his wife. And actually
From Sarah. Okay.
He does have more children. It's interesting, like Jacob, you'll find out he has 12 sons, and we go through that next week, right? So he has 12 sons. And when you look at the son that's favored is the firstborn of the woman that he really wants to be married to.
Yeah, because Abraham got married after Sarah died too, and he stayed busy because he had a bunch of...
Yes, he did. And all of those children became enemies of Israel later on. So you read the Gideon was attacked by the Midianites.
Oh, there you go.
You froze again.
I'm assuming he'll be back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying that you have Midian, who's Abraham's son, becomes the Midianites and attacks Israel when Gideon is the ruler of Israel, the judge of Israel in the book of Judges. So these children form nations that oppose Israel. So it becomes really interesting. They lay all this history out. It becomes much more important later.
We had the same conversation as a family on Sunday after the message, which is really interesting. I had tried to get Boone to come join us, but he's not going to. Camera shy. But I just thought it was interesting given, what we've been talking about and how Abraham has or has not trusted God recently, like this, or, like in the past, like this was a huge thing. So it's not like, I don't ever think like God didn't know what he was going to do. Like, I just think that it was getting Abraham to that point that he knew he trusted God enough to not work things in his own power or to, be shady to try and get what God said he was going to do. And, I wanted to share what Wanda said too from the chat, but that was it.
One of the things that consider here, and it could be that he was wanting to prove to Abraham that he trusted God finally, because he obviously didn't trust God when he was giving his wife to other kings, and you could say he wasn't trusting God when he had Hagar as a wife. That in that culture that would have made perfect sense. So maybe not, but maybe it is. But what I want you to do when you do Bible study is that when you have a set doctrine that you believe, and you have every right to believe it because it's there, like the omniscience of God, that he knows everything. You cannot hide from whether you go high or low. You can go into the seas, you can go anywhere. You cannot hide from God. You cannot escape his all-knowing eye, correct? So there's this doctrine of omniscience for a reason. It's in the scriptures. Yet, when he says something, now I know, I'm like, wait a second, what do you mean now? It's okay to ask those questions without being afraid that your doctrine of omniscience is going to take a fall. And I think that's where Christians really make mistakes when they do Bible study, is they're afraid to ask certain questions. And I found this to be a lot. I'll give you an example. I had a friend, he was in our church, and he used to teach Bible at a Christian school. And I said, when is a wedding the requirement for someone to actually be married biblically? And because I'm like, if two people are living together and they say they're married, we say they're not, but would they have been and he just, before I even got to finish the question, he just went off on me. The Jews had weddings, but I can guarantee you this is what Isaac's wedding looked like. He took her off the camel, threw her in his mother's tent. They had a relationship and they were married. No breaking of a glass and Jewish dances and everything else. That was it. And at that time, it wasn't until much later in history, much, much, much later, that they had ceremonies to make for weddings. So I'm asking a question, culturally, is somebody married because they choose to live with somebody even though they don't consider themselves married? But the thing is that if you're protecting a doctrine, you don't let yourself ask questions where it limits your learning. So when something comes out like this doesn't fit. And I agree. I don't understand how God couldn't know. I don't understand how God can change his mind when he already knows the outcomes anyway. But it says that. Yeah, Kevin.
To kind of go along with that, I mean, we all believe that God's omniscient, but you kind of ask yourself, if that's the case, then why even create it if he knew that Adam and Eve were going to do what they did in the Garden of Eden? There's two people there right now, okay? You know, why go through all the heartache he has to go through? Because he does go through so much heartache. You mentioned Judges before, and I just finished reading Judges last week. How many times did the Israelites just turn their back on him over and over and over again? I said Israelites, I meant, you know, I don't know if they were really considered Israelites at that time.
Yeah, they were.
Okay, but how many times did they turn their back on him over and over and over again and end up worshiping Baal and what's her name, Asheroth or whatever?
Asherah,
And
yeah.
every time when they come back and beg him, he takes them back. And every time they turn their back on him again.
And that's why
So
in
the question
Hosea,
is, if you knew all of that, God, why even start with Adam and Eve if you knew it was just going to be heartbreak over and over and over again?
yeah, and I think that goes back to our limited understanding of God's power and omniscience. I don't know the answer to that, and that I think we asked that question when we came to the very first week we did this. Why did God even bother creating the knowledge of tree?
Yeah, well, John MacArthur.
Why not put it like on Hawaii or something and have the garden in Asia and like they're not even gonna know it exists? Why even put it close enough to them? But he has his reasons, and some of those things we'll learn hopefully later. But
There's a minister by the name of John MacArthur who is on the radio and TV and whatnot. And I was listening to him one night on the way home from a meeting that I had, and he was fired up because he said, you know, people say that God is not a God of grace, especially in the Old Testament. And what he said was, no, you're absolutely wrong, because God showed grace right from the get-go with Adam and Eve. If the wages of sin is death, they sinned immediately and he could have put them to death, but he certainly showed them grace right from the jump.
Yeah, and the thing is that, but at the same time, if we get really defensive, we're not recognizing the reality of the question, because there are times where it looks like God isn't very gracious and I don't understand why. And it's okay to look at it, because I look at Ananias and Sapphira. They're, if you don't know who they are, you read that in Acts, in the book of Acts. They lied. You know, the Holy Spirit said they sold everything and put everything at the apostles' feet when they held a portion back. Because they lied, all of a sudden they're dead. I'm like, whoa, I should be dead 10 times over. I mean, I'm like, you know, like I if they're dead, why am I still here? You know, I don't have the answer to that question. And so you can look and say, well, God has always been a God of judgment, but he does seem harsher in the Old Testament. You know, we'll get to some of those places as we read places. You're going to like, wow, that seems harsh from the God.
Yeah, because there's certain times in Judges when he commands them, kill everybody. Yeah. Everybody. And then you can take their livestock or whatever, and you can split it up among you. But there was times that he told them, kill everything.
Right. There's going to be lots of questions like that when we go through. And I want you to always read the Bible, willing to ask any questions, no matter how uncomfortable they are. Even if it looks like it's making God look bad. Like, okay, God, I don't want to make you look bad, but why do you want me to sing praises and worship to you? Because I know your ego is not so frail that you need me to tell you how great you are. So it's okay to sit there and ask those type of questions. And out of that, I believe God gives some wisdom. As long as you're willing to open, you start protecting certain doctrines. You shut out a whole bunch of scripture that you're not willing to even explore because it makes it too uncomfortable. So always be willing to ask questions, the hard questions. All right?
No, the truth of it is, I mean, who are we to ask God, I mean, question anything that God does? You know, I mean, he says that to Job, you know, pretty much. What have you done?
Yes, that's true. But he also praised Job in the midst of asking those questions. What Job, if Job made a mistake, he basically said, I don't deserve this. Why have you done this to me? Well, no, we all deserve worse. but and questioning God as if he's evil. But questions of understanding is a totally different question. You see, asking God, why did you do this? Or why is this case? And you may not come up with an answer, and you got to be okay with that too, because you're not going to come up with every answer to the questions you ask. But asking the questions for the purpose of knowledge and wisdom when it comes to understanding God and his word is always good. It's always good. So, but I've been a Christian for, 34 years. And I have been at places and myself at times where you feel like ask a certain question and you're like, I'm afraid to ask that question out loud because it'll make me look like a heretic. It's just a question. So
Another thing too with that is that in the Bible it says that it is to the glory of God to conceal things or to create mysteries, but it's the glory of men or kings to search them out. And so God has created questions in our heart, and he wants to see how much we desire him and long after him. And he wants us to ask these questions and to search out the answers. And I think that there are answers out there to these things, because I know personally, I feel like I have answers to all the questions that you just asked, Kevin, but I don't know that I feel like I'm supposed to share them, but
Jacqueline, I'm totally fine if you say, hey, I'd like to see what you think about this. This is how I look at that. And everybody who got that chance to do that. So it's not, I don't want you to feel like I'm the only one who could share his answers here. Because like I've proven I've been wrong a few times in the few weeks we've been able to do this. So feel free to do that. I want to call on Chris Hunt though, because look, he was raising his hand there.
That's me. There's supposed to be some mystery to all of this. If we start feeling like we have it all figured out, or that we do already understand all of this stuff, that to me seems to be akin to wanting to eat the fruit of the tree of good and evil there, or life and death, excuse me. I can't think straight and talk at the same time right now.
That's right.
But the idea, if you feel like you have it all figured out, there's a lack of humility in that to me. And having the humility of saying, God, I don't have it all figured out, and yet I still believe and have faith and trust in what you have planned for me is where it's at.
And that's the whole point of the book of Job at the end, is like,
yeah,
Job had to come to the end and say, I don't know these answers. You're God. I'm just a man, and I'll worship you even if I don't understand everything. And you're exactly right. Jacqueline, if you wanted to share something that you wanted to share before, but you didn't get a chance to, you go ahead and share your perspective on something that you didn't know if you could before.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess as far as why would God create something that is, that is going to bring him such heartache. Hold on one second. I have a son who's having a breakdown right now. Anyway, so part of that is the fact that he created us. I mean, it talks about in the Bible that he created us to be his bride, and he created us to rule alongside of him. And in order to have that happen, he had to create a creature, a being that had the opportunity to love him and that he could love back. And in order to do that, you have to have the opportunity to not love and to greatly hurt, And so in order for God to create something that was that special to him, something that could love him as well as him love it, he had to take the risk of it causing him great heartache and great pain. But he thought that was worth it. And that was worth it for those of us who do know and love him and have chosen to go after him. He was willing to suffer the pain of those who wouldn't. That's my personal thought on it. As far as why he would suffer.
Well, and he I think it's exactly why Jesus suffered, because he thought we were worth it. You can always come up with questions like, why didn't God just make the people that would be obedient? But then we would be different. We're not facing the doubts. We're not facing the persecution, the things that would strengthen our faith. God's plans are beyond complete reasoning.
That's what makes us greater than the angels. He did make creatures that would just be obedient. But, you know, well, some of them weren't. And they have no opportunity for salvation. But you know, I mean, the thing was is that we could turn away and then turn back, you know.
Yes. All right. Ouch. Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah, Mike.
Us to ask you if Abraham or Sarah knew that Abraham was going to go sacrifice his son. I got my own feeling on that, but
Well, share your own feeling of that first.
well, I don't think there's any way she knew. That being her only son, I think he was doing that on his own and had enough faith in God to see that that believed that it may turn out however he wanted or okay, and she would have to be content with that, or would be, it was in her best interest. But I just can't see her knowing and not having any excerpt in the Bible as to how she felt about it.
I think it also is the reality of where the woman's standing in this time in history, that, you know, the man did what the man did, and the woman, women could manipulate their husbands with the best of them at any time throughout history. You see that, you know, with Abraham and Sarah's leverage with him and same thing. They could do things. They have power that's unique to a woman, but he could do what he wanted with his own son. She couldn't really interfere, but I doubt that he told her. That's just my opinion. There's a really awesome story. It's called Peace Child. It's about a missionary that went to a cannibalistic tribe where one village would eat people from other villages, and their value system was that the longer you could deceive your victim and thinking you were a friend before you killed him and ate him, the more heroic you became in the historical lore of your village. And these two villages came together because he was a Westerner that had the ability to give them technologies and stuff to make life easier, but they kept fighting each other. And he was standing there with a wife and a newborn child in a hut, seeing these two villages throwing spears at each other. And he said, I'm leaving. I'm going to go to a village that's not at war with anybody. It was really that whole island that was like that. He could have gone to another village and it would have probably the same thing would have happened. But somebody said, no, tomorrow we'll make peace. And he was like, how do you make peace when you guys value deceit? How can this happen? Because when he told them the whole story of Jesus, he brought all the leaders, he told them the whole story, and they thought Judas was the hero. So then what happened was they said, tomorrow we'll make peace, just see. So the next day they come and there are these two rows of these tribes all lined up with this like swamp in between. And one man comes to the center with a child on his back and the mother just wailing and screaming at her husband to the center. And he's like, what have I done? This woman's child going to be a sacrifice? What's going on? And then there was the other side, the same thing started to happen. A guy with a child, and the mother grabs the child and runs back. And so here's this guy with his child and a crying wife and nobody from the other village. And all of a sudden, they're like, without a peace child, we can't have peace, and the missionary will leave. And all of a sudden, this guy starts running from his hut with his child, like Biakatu or something, starts running like crazy to the center. And his wife wasn't with him. And she starts screaming and she starts running and she gets caught in the swamp and she can't catch up in time. And they switch children. And the switching of children comes with a renaming. And as long as that child is safe in the other village, they could trust each other. So to kill a peace child was the worst thing you could do in their culture. That guy did that without the permission of his wife. You know, he sacrificed his son, gave his son to the other village, and took the child from the other village to raise as his.
He's gone.
He'll be
His
back.
own son.
Yeah.
Huh? What?
You went out again.
I'm sorry.
It's
You
all
know what
right.
I've noticed? As I have a thing that says your internet connection is unstable now, but when it's actually unstable, I don't have that message up there.
Yeah, it's always a little delayed. Jim has a question too. If you were,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not so much a question. It was back to a point that we were talking about before about why would God go through all this. I was just kind of a thought process that, God also sees eternity, and to see what the relationship and what heaven is in eternity with the relationship with his creation may make all of this way worth what we're seeing now. And so, I'm hoping that that's why he did it all.
It's pretty much like your kid that's in grade school that hates school, and you say one day it'll be worth it, and they're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. One day you'll need math. Yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts? Anybody? Yes, Chris.
I was wondering what there is to the symbolism of Isaac, compared to what happened to Christ as a sacrifice. There were a few things I was reading in a summary, and it was online, and I don't know where, but he was talking about the fact that Isaac had to carry his own wood to his own sacrifice, and just some of the points that they made were almost prophetic or symbolic foretelling of what happened at Christ's crucifixion. And
Yeah, I think I had mentioned that earlier. I had said that it is a prophetic reenactment of something bigger going on, that happens a lot in the Old Testament.
And I wanted to go back. There was another thought in the same thing I was reading. They were talking about whether or not God actually intended for Isaac to be sacrificed. And one of the things that they pointed out, this might have even been on Wikipedia or something, but the author that they were quoting said, he quoted Jeremiah 19:5, where he says that that it never crossed God's mind that we would sacrifice our children the way that the Jews were burning their children for Baal. So,
they were familiar with child sacrifice. They did that in that culture. Other cultures were doing that.
yeah.
They were familiar with it, and I think God even said that if you deny me, that's when you're gonna wind up doing that. I think he even prophesied that they would end up doing that if they denied him, and they did. I think King Ahab sacrificed his own son to rebuild the walls of Jericho, and it just, human depravity knows no bounds.
Well, it was the statement in Jeremiah that it never crossed his mind that his children would do that to their own children.
Oh, God said that in Jeremiah?
That's what the quote is. It's 19:5, and of course it's Jeremiah speaking. But
is it Jeremiah, or is it God speaking through Jeremiah?
it's God speaking through Jeremiah.
19:5, I'll go there. I haven't read that verse. I've read all the verses, but I'm like, don't have them all memorized or recalled. 19:5, they have built altars on high places of Baal to burn their children in the fire as offerings to Baal, something I did not command or mention, nor did it enter my mind. So yeah, maybe I'm wrong about whether God actually said they would do that, but I have to know. I don't know. But
it's one thing to point out that they're going to do it because they're sinning, but he doesn't want them to do it for him, is how I take that.
Right. Got it. I don't think that when I look at the sacrifice of Isaac, I don't think God ever planned on, because it was like either Abraham goes through with it and God stops him, or Abraham's just not going to go through with it. So I don't think God actually ever really considered Abraham actually in reality sacrificing his son. I think he just wanted to know, is he going to go through with it? And it's like he'd already given the promise, your children will be as like the stars in the sky, the sand on the sea, the dust of the earth. All those promises are already made, but there's just something different about the way God's assurance, about the way he says it after this moment. It's something significant. Yeah, Kevin.
Well, one thing is that Abraham, or at least in what you read, Abraham never even questioned God at all. Like, why are you wanting me to do this? What will it gain? Or what? I mean, not even a single question comes out.
Not that's written down, no. He might have cursed God. He might have cursed him and not written it down. I don't know. But yeah, I would definitely be questioning it. I think this is one thing that I think about when I look at it's and this is something that has a parallel with us, but we don't see it as clearly, is how many children should Abraham have had at 100 years old? If he's starting at 100, how many kids would you expect him to have?
Starting at 100?
Yes. None. Right. How about starting at 87 when he had Ishmael? You know, yeah, it's 0. He shouldn't have had any kids, right? So, and his wife, who has already gone through
Frozen again.
postmenopausal women have you ever seen have a child? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll say that again. I said, how many postmenopausal women have you seen have children? None, right? Oh, shoot.
Well, even Sarah thought it was, I mean, when they named him Isaac, doesn't that mean like laughing or something? Because
Yeah.
he says, yeah, this is kind of funny because I never thought I'd have a kid. And nursing? Yeah, right.
Yes, because she shouldn't. So, okay, so you look at the parallel. How many women who have never had sex have had children? One, right? So you have 2 miraculous children here. They shouldn't exist, right? So Abraham has a child that shouldn't exist. And so when he sacrifices him, he doesn't see that it's his. It's really not his child. He shouldn't even have one, you know? So that's one of the things that I look at.
Which may be why he may have never questioned God either. But I mean, talk about an absolute show of faith. If he never asked God a question as to why, I mean, that's a huge show of faith, at least in my opinion.
Hey, Jacqueline, you have a question?
Okay. Yeah, so I was wondering, so this is one of the questions I've been thinking about. So in Genesis 24, verse 3, Abraham is talking about getting a wife for Isaac. And he says to his servant, I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will get a son or wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites. So the reason why I'm thinking about this is because in Deuteronomy, God is talking to the people, and he says, Deuteronomy 6, I think 13. Fear the Lord your God, serve him only, and take your oaths in his name. And I recently kind of been reading about this and whatever, that God, commands us a few different times actually to take oaths in his name or to make promises in his name. And I was just kind of like thinking about that and thinking, we don't do that at all as Christians. And what does that look like, and how do we begin to initiate that and follow through on that? And I don't know.
That's an interesting thing, because also it's like Jesus said, you shouldn't swear on earth or swear by God. You just let your yes be yes and your no be no. So
he says by earth or by the altar, but they do say that he's supposed to swear by God's name.
He says in the New Testament?
Yeah, in the New Testament. Yeah. He says you shouldn't swear by yourself or by the earth or by the altar, but he does not say anything against swearing by God's name. And he says the reason why you shouldn't swear against it is because you can't change anything in it.
I'm going to have to do some study on that. That's interesting, Jacqueline. I've never noticed this before. I've never seen where God actually told Abraham to swear on my name. I was always saying, just let your yes be yes and your no be no, and don't say swear to God. You just don't swear at all. That's what I thought it was teaching. So I'm going to have to do some more study before next week, because that's interesting.
Yeah.
I got a quick one. There's everyone always talks about Abraham in that story of sacrificing Isaac, but wasn't Isaac a teenager at the time? So I mean, not only did it affect Abraham and his faith, I think that affects Isaac's faith. And Isaac was probably the most legit patriarch out of Isaac and Jacob, right? Wouldn't you say, as far as like the way they lived and what they did and the effects that they had? Because Isaac saw this, he let his dad put him on the altar, and he was probably big enough to stop his father from doing it.
I don't know. I don't know whether that's the case or not. I don't know how old he was. I know this is after Ishmael's been told to leave at 13 years old, I believe. But I don't know that we know how old he was. And he's asking his dad, like, Father, we have this, and we have, the wood, and we have the fire, but no lamb.
No offering,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we can tell he was big enough to body slam the old man and throw him on the altar instead. I don't know that I can see that that's the case. And as far as which is the most legit patriarch, I don't know, but I do know that there's less written about Isaac than there is Abraham or Jacob. There's more about those. We know a lot more about those two, but I don't know which is. I wouldn't say anyone's more legit than another. If there's ever more legit, it would be Abraham, because he's the first.
Well, he's the first, but they're being less written about in the way the Old Testament's written. It's mostly written of the Jewish people's failure, right? Outside of Joseph, how many in the Old Testament did they write about how great they were?
Well, but they write about the great things they do too. They don't spend as much time writing about David's failures as his successes. Abraham has very few failures. Mostly it's about his obedience to God. I think, I don't know. I wouldn't say that. I just think that, the important events are written out, whether it's their failures or their successes. The things that God wants us to know, those are the things that are written out.
Yeah. I just think Isaac trusted the Lord just as much as Abraham did in that, and after what he saw.
He could.
Breaking up.
Could have, but I don't know. All three of them might have been leaving. If we start looking at Jacob next week, you'll see that it was the Lord. I know I just got disconnected. Next week, you'll see that Jacob, he transitions from the Lord your God to the Lord my God. That changes when he moves to be with his uncle Laban. So, Jim, you had a question?
It wasn't so much a question. You were talking about failures and people's vulnerabilities or whatever. I mean, the only one seemed like in the Old Testament that really seemed to be kind of above that was Daniel. I mean, they didn't speak of any of Daniel's failures. I mean, everybody else showed to be particularly human, and weak.
Yeah, and again, the only one writing about Daniel is Daniel. I don't know. But it's hard to say. I mean, I think the important stuff's captured. It's certainly, and this is really worth remembering, as much as they point to David. Look, if Jesus says this, if God says this about David, he's the only one he could find that was a man after his own heart. And then when you get to John the Baptist, Jesus said he was the greatest man ever born of woman. But the Bible is not about David, and it is not about John the Baptist, right? It is about God and Jesus, the Godhead and his relationship with mankind, and many of those are individuals as a whole. But and we're to look at those people as heroes of the faith and emulate them as much as possible. But they're all fallen human beings. The closest thing we have that isn't would probably be, you could say Enoch, who didn't die, or Elijah, who didn't die. I mean, there's a number of ones that are really great. So, I mean, even if you look at Elijah, I don't think there's really anything negative about him. You might say he's a whiner, but I don't know that I would say he's whining when he really is struggling with, there's nobody but me, So, was there any other questions or thoughts? Hey, Wanda, I was going to ask a question. I know that you're friends with Mary. Have you seen her? Am I messing up here? I am? Okay, I don't want to say anything. I'm sorry. Never mind. Scratch that. It's good to see you, Wanda, even though I can't see you. So, all right. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes, Kevin. Mute.
Yeah, I got at the end of 22, after the angel of the Lord appears to Abraham again, it says, then Abraham returned to his servants and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. And then at the beginning of 23, the death of Sarah, she lived to be 127. Probably that childbirth, as old as she was, probably had an effect on her. But it says, then Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. Were they not together?
Let me see here. Let me see.
Starts in 22:19.
Chapter 22, verse 19. Then Abraham returned his servants. They set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Sometime later, Abraham was told, Milcah is also a mother, and she has borne sons to your brother Nahor, who's the firstborn.
Yeah, it goes through that, but then beginning of 23, Sarah, when she dies, it says that Abraham went to
Oh, I see.
mourn her.
I was looking at verse 23. That's where it messed me up. Okay. I don't know.
Because it sounds like they're apart.
They may have been, or he, I don't know. I wouldn't connect that he went back to Beersheba and not gone to be with Sarah, because you don't know how much time has elapsed there. He could have been away for a little bit. I don't know. He could have been working in the fields or with his sheep and then came back to more. I don't know. I don't know. The way time works in the Old Testament, they skip large portions of time between events. So,
right.
I doubt that. Well, she's 127. She had Isaac when she was 90, so that's 37 years later. I doubt that he sacrificed Isaac, or the attempted sacrifice on Isaac was when he was 37. I think he was a little child. So I doubt that he spent 20 years or so away from her as well. So there's a big gap of time there.
Right.
So anything else we want to revisit? Well, I am in South Carolina. I'll be moving my second daughter and her husband, helping them move back to Michigan tomorrow. You can pray for us as we begin to drive all the way back tomorrow. They're in a hotel, so it's a straight 12.5-hour shot. So you want to say hi? Here's Katie. Those of you who've seen Katie, here's Jim.
Katie.
Hi. How are you?
How about you?
Good.
Great.
I haven't seen you in forever.
I know. Glad to hear you're coming back.
Well, look how long your hair is.
Yeah, it's like really long now. It's never been this long in my life.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
All right.
Mine hasn't been this long either.
Yeah, my hair's never been this long either. All right, well, I'll pray and then we'll be done, and I will see you guys again next week. I appreciate you guys joining me for this. I really enjoy the discussion and your input and seeing you guys. So let's pray. Father in heaven, I thank you again for the chance to meet through the technology and the discussion and study of your word. I pray, Lord, that we remain faithful to read your word, study your word, and follow your word, become doers of your word. And so continue to teach us, open our We'll talk to you guys later. Did you guys hear all that? Because I got one of those messages that says I was stuck.
First half of it.
Sorry. I'm wondering whether it's my computer or not. I might try my phone next time because I don't think that it happens as much on my phone. So, all right. I will see you guys later.
Take care.
Have a safe trip.
Safe trip.
Bye.
Good to see you all. Bye.
Bye.
Are these moms?
Are these moms?